We'll give it just a few more minutes before we meet critical mass. Hello, everyone. The time is 3:02, so we should probably get started. Thank you, everyone, for attending this meeting for the State Water Board's second agricultural expert panel. We really appreciate everyone being here today. Sam is going to be joining us later, so we will get this kicked off with this working group meeting, working on the draft report of the panel recommendations. My name is Adelia McGregor, and I'm a senior engineering geologist with the State Water Resources Control Board's Division of Water Quality, working on the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. This is, I believe, our 11th panel working group meeting. So we've had many and see amazing progress amongst the panel. So we greatly appreciate everybody's continued participation in the process. Before I hand it over for some opening remarks and introductions, I want to remind everyone first that today's meeting is being conducted in English. For future meetings, interpretation services can be arranged as needed based on community interest and participation. We anticipate having full interpretation services in the future at our public workshop and during our final plenary meeting. We remain committed to meaningful access and will make every effort to provide Spanish language summaries of meetings when requested. Information on how to obtain language assistance for future meetings or summaries will be shared in the chat. And second, for technical assistance during this meeting, please email dwq-ilrp@waterboards.ca.gov. Staff will be keeping an eye on this inbox, and staff will try to respond as soon as possible. Now I will hand it over to Manny Leon to provide an overview in Spanish. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Manuel León. I work in the Office of Public Engagement, Equity, and Tribal Affairs. Hola, buenas tardes todos. Mi nombre es Manuel León y yo trabajo en la Oficina de Participación Pública, Equidad y Asuntos Tribales. Este mensaje es para comunicar que la reunión de hoy se llevará a cabo en inglés. Para futuras reuniones se pueden coordinar servicios de interpretación según sea necesario, basado al interés y la participación de la comunidad. El personal de la Junta Estatal del Agua sigue comprometido en proveer acceso y hará lo posible en proporcionar resúmenes de las reuniones en español cuando se soliciten. En el chat se compartirá información sobre cómo puede obtener asistencia lingüística o resúmenes de las reuniones en español. Gracias.
Thank you. Wonderful. So before we do quick introductions as our panelists and run through our agenda, I want to hand it over to Karen Mogus for opening remarks.
Hi, Karen Mogus, Chief Deputy Director, State Water Board. Can you all hear me? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
we can hear
see.
you.
Okay, great. Just wanted to thank everyone for joining. We've got 66 participants on the platform right now, so just really demonstrates the interest in what the panel is doing and all of the good work and good discussion that's happening during these working sessions. So thanks for attending. Also want to thank the panel for all of your hard work and continued efforts. This has been a long haul and we're not quite done yet, but the finish line I think is pretty close. So really looking forward to more discussion today, hearing from the panelists as well as from commenters at the end of the meeting. And I'm sure it'll be a great one. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So before we go over the agenda for the day, let's go around the virtual room and introduce the panelists. I'll read you off in the order that you appear on my screen. If you could quickly just introduce yourself, then we will be able to get started. So we will start with the panel chair, Daniel Geisler. Daniel.
Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Geisler. I'm a cooperative extension specialist at UC Davis with a focus on nutrient management.
Thank you, Daniel. Next, we'll go to Ali.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ali Montazer. I am UCC Irrigation and Water Management Advisor in Southern California.
Thank you, Ali. Next, we will go to Michael.
Yes, good afternoon. Michael Kahn. I'm an Irrigation Water Resources Farm Advisor located in Monterey County.
Thank you, Michael. Next, we'll go to Nagudu.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Godo Atsume. I work with UCANR. I'm a Sigma Small Farms Technical Assistance Coordinator.
Thank you, Gudu. Next, I have Ruth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ruth Alquist-Swillard. I'm the Interim Director of UC SWRCB, the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program at UCNR.
Thank you, Ruth. Next, we'll move on to Richard Smith.
Hello, everyone. Richard Smith, retired vegetable crop farm advisor, Monterey County.
Thank you, Richard. Next, we will go to Thomas Harder.
Hi, this is Thomas Harder. I am Professor of Cooperative Extension at University of California, Davis.
Thanks, Thomas. And we now have Hannah.
Hannah Waterhouse, soil biogeochemist and assistant professor at UC Santa Cruz.
All right, thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at our agenda for the day. So not a lot going on. Well, actually lots going on in a single item here on our agenda. So we've gone through our introductions with the panel members and our welcome. The next thing that we'll get into is our panel discussion. At 5:40, we will go into public comment and we are planning to adjourn at 6 p.m. So just a reminder that today we are working on version 8 of the draft, and that draft will be dropped, is available on our FTP, and we will also make a copy available in the chat as well. But before we jump in, we wanted to flag for everyone that there was an email exchange amongst all panel members in response to an inquiry from a stakeholder. In accordance with the provisions of Bagley-Keene, we have uploaded that exchange to the FTP site for transparency and are also going to drop a copy of that exchange in the chat. This exchange just occurred last night, so we are making it all available for you all today. So we will now jump into the panel discussion. So I will hand it off to Daniel.
Great. Thank you very much. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can.
Just 1 second. Can everybody see the screen with the front page of the report?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thanks everybody for attending today. The entire panel is present. That's great. And thanks everybody for commenting on the latest report. There are a lot of very good suggestions, and many of these suggestions are kind of small changes to the wording. And what I would suggest today is that after this meeting, I will revise and incorporate these suggestions, but I have flagged some, I think 20 passages I think we should really discuss today. So my suggestion is that we start with these. If we have time afterwards, we can discuss other passages that are important or you think we should discuss as well today. So first, thanks, Mike, for these pictures. I think that looks great to have a variety of systems presented. Could you include on the second page what these pictures represent and who took the pictures? Could you send that list to the water board so that they can forward it to me and I can incorporate that here on the second page of the report so that we know who took the pictures and what they represent?
Yeah, that's no problem. I didn't know. I was just sort of suggesting these pictures I was thinking that, panelists are from different regions. They might want to submit like one good picture representing their area or what they do. So, but I don't want to bog things down. Whatever you want to do. I can.
I like it. If others have pictures, then we can replace one or two or add more. But I like it to have a variety of systems represented. That's great. Okay, then I got some comments on the background and the introduction. I will incorporate them. One thing I think we need to discuss today is we are here with question 1. Thomas suggests throughout the report to replace targets with targets/limits. And I wanted to ask everybody, is that fine with you that we go with targets/limits throughout?
And if I can quickly explain why I did that, I think
please.
Just want to be crystal clear that we are not talking about one or the other. And so where we do talk about one or the other, I left it as either target or limit. But where we're clearly ambivalent, where we are not making any suggestion that it be either a target or a limit, I explicitly wrote targets/limits. And that way there's no two ways about it. And if I misinterpreted or missed any one place where it should be either just a target or just a limit, it would be great if you can flag that and we can change that. But my notion was that we were not going to decide whether it should be a target or a limit in, I think now all cases. And so I explicitly wrote it that way.
Thank you.
So question to the panel, whether everybody is on board with that.
Any concerns? Ruth, you have a comment?
Would it be possible in the first place where this is mentioned in this 441 to 446 introduction to just add a sentence that says, please see the individual sections for whether it is a target, a limit, or both, just to make that clear up front, that there might be some times when it's a target, sometimes when it's a limit, and sometimes when it could be either one. I think that would be just helpful to clarify up front.
Yeah, I think the only place where it's either a target or a limit is where we specifically refer to region 3 or region 5 rules, which can be either targets or limits, but otherwise it's always targets, limits.
would it be clear if we mentioned there that explicitly here we are talking about targets in this section instead of adding it here? Would that work? Or Ruth, what do you think? Would that work too?
I think either of those would work, either clarifying it in the summary or in each section. I think if the way the summary is here, if it just says targets/limits, it sounds like throughout the document it might be referred to as either one. And so if, it just seems like it's helpful to pull out like that it's not always targets or it's not always limits and it's not always either or. But we could also do that in the specific sections.
Yeah. Okay, I can work on that. Thank you. Hannah?
Sorry, my computer is being glitchy. I like Thomas's suggestion, so I let's vote for that.
Godu?
I do like Thomas's suggestion. I think it's helpful to have it that way. I was wondering if we have this defined somewhere in the document, define what we mean by target and what we mean by limits. I know Karen provided that to us. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's here. I cite Karen from her presentation so that it's clear what is meant by target and limit.
Great.
Okay, Richard?
Yeah, I like the suggestion too. I think there was one spot in where we did have limits in mind that when we get down to it, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Then the next point, Hannah mentioned that last time, are we going to suggest targets throughout? I asked the question here, does that answer the question? You all said, or those who responded that no, not really. So Thomas added this section here, this short paragraph in blue. What do you think? Does that answer the question, how we deal with targets and limits? Ruth?
I like the paragraph in blue. I'm good with it.
Thank you. Any other comments or concern? Ali?
I like it. I think it's really good here. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, or do you all agree we keep that sentence and that kind of deals with the question, how do you, or yeah, are we suggesting targets throughout or limits too? Okay, great.
And maybe quick question to Ruth, does that paragraph sufficiently introduce why we're then talking about targets, limits, and not
Yes.
targets or limits?
I think that works. That addresses my previous concern.
Thank you.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Daniel, really quick, do we think that paragraph should be like moved more toward? Oh wait, that's question. Never mind.
We are.
Yep, never mind. Sorry.
Yeah, we are pretty much at the beginning. So response, then we have the summary, and it's part of the first recommendation.
Perfect.
So then Thomas and Mike worked on point 9. That's what a point we discussed quite a bit last time. I will show it without markup because a lot has changed. It's probably because the version we received from Sam didn't delete everything. My interpretation is that whatever is in yellow is now the official answer, or the
That
latest
is exactly
version of
right.
this.
Yes.
Is that correct, Thomas?
Yes, we should just look at the highlighted part. And I'm going to read it quickly because I think it's important.
Yes,
and
please.
just to give you some background on this. So Mike and I worked on this, and I also had a conversation with Region 5 after Patrick raised concerns at the last meeting about how this is done. And I've also had a conversation with the environmental justice groups yesterday. And not everybody agrees exactly with this, but I think between Mike and I, we felt this was a good way to approach this. The panel agrees that there's a point at which end discharges to groundwater are excessive, and regional boards should be able to set initial targets limits that all growers should be able to meet within a reasonable time frame, 3 to 5 years. Due to the variability of geography and diversity of crops among regions, the panel finds that it is not reasonable to make specific statewide procedural recommendations. The panel agrees that the specific metric and the specific process to setting such a target limit must be developed by each regional board. Some regions, like Region 5 and 3, have already set these initial targets limits, and the panel supports those approaches. The combination of evaluating A-R, A, and A over R data collected for a region over several recent years can help inform initial targets limits. One approach discussed, and not meant to be either prescriptive or to replace already existing approaches in any of the regions, was to set the initial target limit at the highest 80th or 90th percentile of the A-R data, or of other selected metrics of end discharge, including model or other equation-based estimates that account for example, climate, soil, and economic practice variations. Another approach discussed is to identify the A-R that corresponds to an excessively high average A over R value. For example, A over R greater than 2 in a region. Whenever targets limits are set, they need to be accompanied by technical assistance to support affected growers in implementing best management practices. See Section 5.2 for technical assistance needs. Finally, and importantly, the panel recommends that the determination of targets limits consider how setting these targets limits would affect the overall effectiveness of the regulatory process to avoid unintended consequences that negatively impact the desired long-term outcome of reducing nitrogen discharges from agriculture to groundwater and surface water supplies.
Thank you.
And
By
I
the way,
had
I marked one sentence green.
Yeah.
I don't remember we discussed that. I just wanted to highlight that, but I'm not opposed to it, but I don't remember that we discussed that as a panel. So I wanted to mark it, to highlight it.
That might have been a discussion just between Mike and I.
Mike, you have a comment?
Well, if you remember at some point, Thomas showed us a graph. I think you showed the whole panel, this graph of A-R in different categories. And then on one axis and the other axis, you had A divided by R. And you could see once we got to a certain high A-R, that A divided by R got quite high. I think you showed that, and but we didn't really discuss it. But I thought, well, that's a reasonable way, because you did it. If you do that over all the crops in a region, you can sort of pick where, the A divided by R is getting inefficient, And I don't know if that ratio would be 2 or 3, but if you look at just the tails, it's sort of, you remember we had this whole discussion, is it 80%, 90%? Well, this is a way, where those two intersect, I thought would be helpful, because you could say, well, it's going to be when it's 3, something like that. And that would tell you what the A minus R should be.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good to me. Yeah. Richard?
Can Michael or Daniel, can you explain the final sentence? I'm not sure what you guys are getting at there. I just want to understand it.
Yeah, I can speak to that. The one about the
Yes, that one.
overall effectiveness and the
Yeah.
unintended consequences.
Uh-huh.
I think what we heard last week from Patrick Palupa from Region 5 is that one of their reasons not to set limits and use targets was that in their experience, when you set a limit, people just end up going right below the limit rather than actually moving further. And if I understood it correctly, and you end up not moving in the overall direction you really want to move, it becomes sort of a place where people report and then they don't do anything else beyond it. And so we wanted to include a notion that there's sort of a bigger picture to consider in selecting targets, limits, that needs to look at the overall feasibility of the approach and what it how to work with the regulated community, and be efficient and effective as well, both efficient and effective in moving the regulated community to where it needs to be. And we just wanted to call that out.
Mm-hmm.
And those are pieces where, it's not my wheelhouse to think about sort of the social science aspects of regulations and the legal aspects of regulations and the economic aspects of regulations. And I don't think we were asked to do that, but I think we can call it out and defer to other people for expertise to weigh in on that when regions make their decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure you set a target limit. I'm not sure how you get around what you just described. But we do talk later about the iterative process. And do you think that in some way kind of pushes this whole thing forward, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think that, this comment is complementary to that iterative process, which needs to be then mentioned, which we wanted to talk about explicitly I think it was in a later question.
Yeah. Now, one final thing. This was the spot where we talked about, setting a limit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And so I'd just like to see what people think. Is this the moment for that, or are we not doing that?
I'm glad you're pointing that out. That is the crux of the question. And Michael and my consideration in formulating it this way was to respond to Mr. Palupa's comment 2 weeks ago that if we set a limit here and specifically do it with an 80% or 90% value, it may derail the entire approach that the Central Valley is using. And I think we were swayed by the notion that setting a limit would potentially achieve the opposite of what we're trying to achieve.
Okay.
And I discussed this also yesterday with the EJ groups, and we all agreed that there should be a place in this document where we point out that yes, if you go into a region and you go to a crop, there ought to be a way to say enough is enough and too much is too much. But how a region approaches that and what process they use to come to that number should be left to the region.
That I agree with. I mean, I fully agree with the concept of letting the region decide. And I guess I'm just still struggling with the idea of people, getting just below the limit and then sitting there if we still have a process that keeps moving. You know what I'm saying? Moving forward plus an evaluation. That's what I'm still not quite grasping here. So sorry.
Richard,
I also wonder, would it be different if it's a target or a limit? Even if it's a target, some people will just try to get below it. No matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter whether it's a target or a limit. But Ruth, you had a comment to this point?
Yes, I have a couple things. One is, I think the language about the iterative process is gone now. Is that correct?
In this paragraph, yes.
And
In this
is it
paragraph-
mentioned? Is it mentioned somewhere else though? It looked like a lot of
Yes.
it was deleted, but some of it's still there. Is that correct?
I thought we moved it to somewhere else. There was another bullet that moved,
yeah,
that
sorry.
got moved to another, I think to question 2. Yes.
We
Okay.
It's the
discussed
first,
that.
it's now the first 2 bullets in question
Right.
2. We moved it there.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
So it is
great.
still
That makes
there.
sense. And do we still have the language about determining what's agronomically? I see it's right there. Okay. I got a little lost in the document. Sorry. So we still are recommending that targets / limits would be informed by what's agronomically achievable. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that it says it right here. Yes.
Yeah, that works. The other thing I was going to mention, just in relation to that comment about unintended consequences, is that there's also some language that I added in a comment in a different section about the approach to data privacy that is similar to that.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess I'm with Richard and his confusion on how sending a target or limit would just have them right below that limit, which is, and if you have an iterative process moving people forward, that is the point. Get them below the limit, even if it's just below, and then keep. Yeah, I don't really understand that aspect, and I did think that at least in past discussions we did talk about needing that it would be reasonable to set a limit as a starting point. Is that the section, the 80%, 90%? Yeah.
Yes.
And I
It
think,
clearly says here initial.
yeah. So
Until this version, it was initial limit.
Yeah, and I think that at least provides a kind of backstop of getting egregious applications or discharges down, and so I think, yeah, I think I would vote for it to be a limit.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you. I think overall I agree with this, except there is one concern I always have, and here specifically. I think we need a language here very clearly, because when we say something strong like this, we always need to think this way. There are regions really there is no need for those limit and target.
But Ali
I
will
don't-
discuss that later.
Well, no, that's not the point. You know, I think the language should be something here because we don't want the region just follow each other. They need justification for adding those limit and target. I think we need a language here to free that concern.
Here, isn't that sentence exactly what you're asking for? And the next sentence too. It's in here.
Yes, must be developed by the region, but based on what? You know, because based on, you know, the cropping system justification, this, that, I think if we can add the language very clearly there, because, you know, my concern is we don't want the region just follow each other for this. If we don't have the language there, it might happen, and there is concerns among growers, I think. You know, even if the region wants to you know, deploy that, they need justification for that.
But wouldn't a regional water board not have a consultation with stakeholders and discuss these issues before they put up an order?
I don't know.
So far, that's what has happened. So I have to admit, I don't really see what else we should add about regions should develop their own. It's really here.
So you think it's sufficient, that wording?
Yes. I mean, these two sentences, they cover it.
Yeah, and that was the intention.
Yeah.
Mike?
Let's see if I can remember. I was trying to just clarify that this section is just for the initial choosing of some target or limit, right?
Yes.
So I don't see a problem like, okay, yeah, if they get underneath it, that's great. But there's going to be interim targets or limits as we discuss below. And so they can't stay there, right? This is just, you know, the maximum where you could start. It's you know, it sort of assures that if you're below it, you're not, you might still be using too much nitrogen fertilizer or something, but it's not going to hurt your crop. And, you know, it's just a initial limit. And as far as, you know, whether it's limit or target, Thomas and I discussed this, and he pointed out that even in region 3 in the ag order, it doesn't, the 500 they have is not a limit. It's a target. The limits are further down when we get to about 300, which is sort of opposite of how we think of things. And he was explaining that he had a discussion with Tess Dunham about this, and limits are always where you're trying to get to, not where you start. In my mind, I don't see why we can't have a limit and say you at least got to be below, you know, whether it's 500 or something else. But we decided in the end to just let the regional boards figure this out because we are not regulators or lawyers.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Richard?
Well, I really appreciate the thought that Mike and Daniel, or I mean Thomas, put into this section, and I'm really trying to understand some of the nuance of what you suggested, because I think there's some really good thought went into this. And maybe for me, I could be satisfied with the concept of letting the regions decide, because I think that ultimately is the best approach as we go through this, the whole rest of this thing. You know, because we cannot foresee the situations that each region, you know, the context in which they're operating. I guess, you know, when we originally wrote this, you know, we did get feedback, you know, from the group that, you know, when we were looking at those initial numbers from Region 3, and then Daniel, you had that example, I think it was silage corn, you know, which showed that, you know, above 80%, you know, they were just, you know, clearly it looked like something could be done there. You know, that was kind of the motivation that we were operating on. And I still think there's that you can make that argument, that you could certainly probably make a limit, whether it's 80 or 90% in the initial stage. But does it have to be a limit? You know, I don't want to get, you know, lost and hung up on that detail if we're going to leave it up to the regional boards.
Thanks. Ruth?
I just had a question. Do we want to specify in this paragraph the specificity of the region and also the specificity of the crop? I know we had talked before about like looking within a type of crop or even a type of crop in a certain soil type that you'd then look at the 80th percentile of that data set. Do we want to mention anything about that here, or do we want to leave it more general? Because I do think right now it says region, you know, the 80th or 90th percentile based on the regional data. Do we want to be more specific, or do we do that later on?
You know, I think it was there and I removed it because somewhere else, in the part that Daniel and I worked on, we realized, you know, if you start making recommendations for every single crop and soil type, that's a big use of resources. This is sort of the low-hanging fruit, is the idea, the initial limit, and it should cross-cut across all the commodities grown in that region.
I guess I tend to, as you all know, push back a little bit on things that seem one size fits all. Because I think there is such diversity within California agriculture. And so I wonder if it could be helpful to mention that that could be an option here. I agree about the low-hanging fruit.
Ruth, what about, and Daniel, if you can highlight it, there's a, in that sentence that starts with one approach discussed, it says specifically that that it's in that highest percentile of whatever the end discharge metric is, where that end discharge metric includes model or other equation-based estimates that account for climate, soil, and economic practice variations. So that's kind of where Mike and I buried that specific part, you know, where like in the Central Valley, the SWOT model accounts for the very specific soils and the very specific practices and the very specific climate in a wherever a field is. In the Central Coast, they have these discount factors. And so some of this is buried in the metrics, some of it is not. And that's how we wanted to word it to raise that point and that possibility.
That makes sense. Although it looks like it's only applying, those variations are only applied to the model or other equation-based estimates. And could they be also applied to just the data? That would be my question.
So equation-based estimates, I assume that would be A minus R.
Okay, I guess that's an equation.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
very sorry. I guess I was thinking of more complex equations.
No,
That
no,
makes sense.
keep it simple here.
Got it. Got
Can
it.
I
Thank
make
you.
Can I make a real quick comment just in response to this conversation before, I don't know if,
Yeah.
I don't know if in like an appendix or something, we could include some of the an example of what we were talking about, like, bin by soil, bin by climate, bin by crop. And then maybe also on that note, including the graphs that Thomas developed, just like an example of one with A minus R corresponding to the A over R.
I think I have some of that in chapter 6. I talk about, it's models in a very general way, and and includes some of this equation piece. And I talk about how the SWOT model accounts for soils properties, and then the regional 3 accounts has the discount factors. So if you can take a look at chapter 6 and see what is there, what I don't have in there is the violin plots that I did, and I can work on those and add those into chapter 6.
Great. Thanks, Thomas.
Ali?
To my earlier comments, I think this is good, except one thing here. I think even though, the region decide on this, all the paragraph is about setting up limit and target. It means we already accepted for all region until we add something here. I think when we talk about the panel agrees that the specific metric and the specific process to setting or not setting such a target, because that's option. Not setting is an option here, because the entire paragraph is about setting. It means we even didn't we don't think about that option here.
Would that be fine with everybody when we amend it, process to setting or not setting such a target limit? Okay,
So
yeah, I will add that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Question, so that would imply that there will never be any targets or limits, right? I mean, if there's no initial one, then you're never going to do it.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean,
A day may come again.
yeah, the day may come, but you're not,
Yes.
yeah. Basically you will not,
I think the main point is
limit on anything.
we consider there is a time, there is no need. But if we don't have that, it means there is no time for that. But there is at least one time. I think we eliminate that in this sentence if we don't have it. Maybe in the future, 20 years later, there is a need for target, even in that region.
But then that would be the initial target. So
Exactly.
there will be, at one point, there will be initial target.
Of course.
I understand what Mike is.
Well, I guess
Mike's point.
what I'm concerned about, Ali, in your area, if a grower is putting on 1,000 pounds an acre of nitrogen, is that okay? It's just that there might be some limit that region wants to say because, set, because in 20 years, if people keep putting that very high amount on, it eventually has impacts to groundwater, So,
well,
I'm fine with that, but
until we do not have that, as it even documented, I do not have any documented for those kind of fertilizer applications in these regions.
yeah, so then setting a very high limit doesn't impact anyone, right?
Yeah.
They're below it is the point. And so the idea is the initial target limit is just to take out the people that might be putting on really high amounts, right? And not to say that you're setting a limit that's gonna impede their farming. No, this is for way outliers, right? That are just generally putting on way too much nitrogen way outside what is normal.
Well, no, I know your point, but we are just creating more, complications here, because still we discuss the difficulties, for some regions, and those kind of things just create more difficulties. I think we didn't resolve those issues still for example, in the desert, water and groundwater issues, and we are adding some other, complication. I don't know.
But do you agree that even in the Imperial Valley, there may be a point at which end discharge to groundwater are excessive? And if that's the case, regional board should be able to set initial targets and limits. So it's really for the case where discharge is excessive. That's the first sentence here. Excessive, not high, excessive. But do you agree that there may be a point in every region where that is reached, where we can say, yes, that's really excessive?
I think that's very complicated. First we need to find out this is really groundwater, usable groundwater, the source.
No, that will be dealt in question 9, Ali.
No, I agree.
Really?
I agree, that part.
So can we leave it the way it is? It is initial target limit in a situation where excessive nitrogen is discharged.
And I wanted to, Daniel.
Ali, sorry, 1 second, Thomas. Yeah. Ali, or are you still uncomfortable?
No, I think that's a good point. I'm glad you made it, because it shows first the region should have justification for excessive, and then think about that. I think that's
exactly. That's really the whole point here, where we say, yeah, if it's excessive, we should they could come up with some limit or target.
Okay.
Initial limit or target. Okay, great. Thank you. Thomas.
Yeah, I don't think we have to refer to all the exceptions every time we say something should be done. I think we just say what should be done, and then in the answer to question 9, we clearly identify where we think there ought to be, a separate process for exceptions. And don't worry about, nobody's going to just read question 1 answer and then skip reading question 9. And so I think that to the degree to which there's going to be exceptions, there's going to be exceptions, and it's understood that those exceptions have a different process, and that includes whatever we answer on any of the other questions, including this one. And so I totally understand your concern, Ali, but I don't think we have to worry about always referring to these exceptions whenever we say something ought to be done, or we have a finding. But I still hear Richard and Hannah say, isn't there a way to say, is this a strong enough language, the sentence you just highlighted, Daniel? Is that strong enough language to get to the, to having a backstop that just, would that we would agree, regions ought to be able to find a backstop, and they should enforce some, in one way or another, whether it's a target or a limit, be set aside, but that there be a backstop. And do we write, instead of should be able to set initial targets limits, must be able to set, or must set initial targets limits, that all growers should be able to meet within a reasonable time frame? I mean, or should Hannah and Richard, is there a way to formulate this? Or maybe it is already there. I don't know. Are you suggesting perhaps to rethink how strongly we word the sentence?
Yeah, I think.
Or is it okay the way it is?
Well, I think from where it evolved from, it has less, less teeth, for sure. And my interpretation of it is that there isn't necessarily a backstop. So I do like the idea of, whether it's a target or a limit, farmers have to get below this excessive amount within a reasonable time frame. So I like the suggestion you made, Thomas, about and regional boards must set initial targets limits. Would either strengthening that language or having should be able to set limits would be.
The original idea was with limits in this paragraph was about limits, and we talk about excessive. I think we could definitely defend talking about limits only here. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Hannah just said, because I think that was the initial concept, that based on just the it's like a first step, and hopefully it's not a painful step, you know what I'm saying? That it's something that most growers should be able to do. I guess the other thing that I don't know that we have here is that we talk about this evaluation process, right, later in this answer. And, we don't define that. We don't say, okay, there's some funding for this, from such and such a fund. But, I do think that is a very, very important part of this whole process, too, is that even in the initial step, we may have to have some evaluation of like, okay, how are people doing? Okay, well, if they're just getting down to 499 pounds, okay, I guess they're able to do it. But if, for whatever reason, and I was driving through the Santa Maria Valley the other day, and I was looking at that area, and that area is significantly different even than Salinas. They do more rotations there. And what worries me about a place like that, and we have places like that in Salinas too, when you add another rotation to your yearly cycle, all of a sudden these targets and limits are get very difficult to achieve, and so I don't want us to paint the growers into a corner. I do think we should have these initial steps, but we need to be the regional boards need to be I don't know what the procedure is. I don't want to think off the top of my head, and I'm not even sure that we're responsible for doing that, but I do believe that we should have some kind of some wording in there where the regions take a moment to look at and see how's everybody doing. Okay, who's not making this target limit? Why? What's the barriers? What can be done?
We discussed that somewhere later, not in this point, but this is definitely part of the report.
Yes.
I can't
I know
remember
it's in
exactly
there.
where it is, but it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to put it here too. I mean, I probably would, but I tend to be wordy, right?
Okay, so very quickly, please, because it's already 4 o'clock and we're still with this first section. I think we need to move on, otherwise it will be 5:30 and we're still only halfway through. But Ruth, please.
I'll make a very quick suggestion. Could we flag this paragraph and come back to it after we read these other sections that give more detail? Because I think if there's more detail provided, that may make many of us feel more comfortable with how the paragraph is written. And overall, I like it. I wonder if we could just put a note that after we read the rest of question 1 and 2, we come back to this and just make sure it's the way we like it.
We can come back, yes, although we're not going to read everything in 1 and 2.
Right, that's true.
But yeah, but for the moment, let's leave it the way it is. I think Thomas and Mike put a lot of thought in it, and I think it's definitely a version that's easier to understand than the old version.
Hey, Daniel, can you make the type a little bit bigger on the screen?
How does it look like?
That's great. That's much better. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, so the next section, that was point 10. This is now moved to question 2. So that's why it's deleted here, but it's still in the report. It has been moved to question 2. And here we had some comments about the fee adjustments. I think what we need to remember is this is a report to the water board, and we just mentioned one way coalitions could address the issue, but I don't think we need to go too much into detail how they would do it. It's just a suggestions. If coalitions want to be proactive, they could work with the fees they assess to the growers. But I think if coalitions find that a good way to deal with it, there are a lot of smart people working for the coalition in region 3 and 5, and they can come up with a solution. I don't think we need to prescribe how that would be done. But Ali, you may disagree.
No, just one question for the panel. It might be there, I don't know. Well, you say growers pay to the coalition. Okay.
Yes.
So it means that fee is part of the service and their income to manage the entire story. And then you are reducing their income from the people who are doing great job. So our coalition agree with that? Because that's part of their income.
Well, they could increase the fees for those who are in the top and decrease for those at the bottom, and so get the same total amount of fees. That would, if I were a coalition and I like this idea, then that's how I would do it.
But it will create some issues for the coalition at the same time, because they increase their fees, and then I don't know,
For those who cause the problems, yeah. But that, I think we should really leave that to the coalitions to figure out if they may find that this idea doesn't work for them at all, but other than that, they should figure out how they can still get their income if they lower it for some of the people who really don't contribute to the problem at all.
Daniel, I don't know if it's just me, but your screen is black.
Oh,
Yeah, same. It weirdly just
do
went.
we have issues again? Oh yeah, let me see. I stop sharing. Is it still black?
It's
Yeah, it's
loading.
Loading.
Oh, again.
Daniel, let me share it on my end and we'll just continue and you just tell me where to go.
It works now.
Okay. Yeah,
Oh,
that
this
works.
is Thomas's. Okay, great.
So line 750. Just wanted to point out, so that is the section that was moved from question 1. It is now in question 2. And then you can go all the way to 1015. So there are a lot of good comments in between, and I will incorporate them and show you for the next version. So here was a comment. Is it really, Mike had the question, is it really region 5, 7, and 8? What about region 4? My suggestion would be, shall we just write some regions, including region 5, selected to focus on, and so leave it open which regions are we talk about? Or do we have a definite answer which regions fit that description?
Region 4 is, remind me again, Michael.
Los
that San
Angeles.
Oh,
Well,
that's Los Angeles.
yeah,
Mhm.
Los Angeles. So Ventura County would be
Mhm.
in there.
We can add 4 to this list. We can just leave it open.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on all the what each region is doing.
For
So
7 and 8, I looked at their reports and they look to be structured very similar to what 5 is doing.
I would suggest let's just write some regions, including region 5 as an example, and then leave it open which ones also contributes or fall
That's
under
fine.
that variant, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then 1069. I hear, Mike, you mentioned that this statement is misleading. I can work on it and correct that based on your comment, if that's okay.
see what I said. Yeah, I think I cleared this with Sarah Lopez, and they do report the total water applied. It's just what they have to account for the nitrogen in the water is being T. So yeah, thank you.
Then yes, I can correct that for the next version. Then 1096. That's about anonymization. We got a lot of comments here. I can also incorporate them, all your comments. Would that be fine with everybody, or do we need to discuss further? No comment. Okay, I will work on it. But all good suggestions. I think we can write it up that to have make a good point here. Then 1312.
Before we go there, Daniel, should we discuss point 4? Have we ever discussed this? There's been some discussion on and we've heard comments from both the agricultural community and the environmental justice community about the need, from the agricultural community, the need to have some kind of protection, privacy protection, and from the environmental justice community, the need to know the acreage of individual fields. I wanted to just flag, these categories. Is this something that the panel is comfortable with suggesting, or does it need to be something else?
I think it's a suggestion, so the coalitions would still choose their own group categories if they wish. Ruth?
I have had some conversations where there are a lot of different opinions about the sizes of the categories as well. I do think it makes sense to define it more regionally, although then it's harder to compare across regions if you're trying to do that kind of data analysis. So I could kind of see it either way. One question I had is, do these tables, are they reporting by APN or anonymous APN identifier or anonymous grower ID? Or are they just reporting as a category within a township?
They, so in region 5, they report at at several different levels. They report at the field level, they report at the APN level, and they report at the township level. So there's different tables for these. I don't know that I have one off the cuff here to share. Basically on each of these tables, you'll have individual entries, that is individual rows, either by APN, anonymized APN, anonymized field, or a very specific township, not anonymized. And the APN and the field anonymized data have all of the numbers that are reported, the N applied, the N removed, a lot of other information in each row, but it doesn't include the acres. There's no acreage attached to the row. You can also track across years. You can track you can pick one particular anonymized ID and sort of see how it does over time, but you don't know whether it's a 2-acre orchard or whether it's a 2,000-acre orchard. And so the suggestion here would be that there be an extra column in these anonymized rows that identifies which category this particular row falls into, this particular field or APN. In the township summary, you have acreages you have the crops and you have the total acreage that goes with each crop. That's in region 5. In region 3, the table that was shared with us does not have any information on a field or an orchard. It just has information by farm, but the farms in the Central Coast are not that large. There's few farms that are over 640 acres in size, which would be 1 square mile. Most farms are quite a bit smaller. But the farms that do occupy most of the area tend to fall in the larger class. And there's not, as to my knowledge, there's not a breakdown below the farm level as far as tracking nitrogen numbers. One of the things that be added to this question too is that there be percentiles reported, so the distribution for the various reported items in the INMP, so the precipitation, irrigation, ET, runoff, recharge, nitrogen applied, nitrogen removed, and where they use models such as SWAT in the Central Valley, that the individual for crops within a region like San Joaquin Valley or the Tulare Lake Basin or the Sacramento Valley, or maybe for the whole valley, that for crops specifically, the individual budget pieces are reported and the percentiles are given. So we get an idea of what is removed, what is applied, what's the range of atmospheric deposition, what's the range of runoff that comes, that's sort of considered in these models. So these things can be tracked by crop and we can start to understand what's happening, for individual crops, at least the major ones that are considered in these models.
Going back to the acres, I think it's a good suggestion. And if in one region there is only one field, let's say that is more than 1,000 acres, then the coalition could just cap it at 500 or say larger than 500. So if they are concerned that everybody will immediately know, oh, that's grower X. But as a suggestion, I think it's good, and I think some information on the acreage should be included, just so that it's visible to see, okay, so let's say those who make progress, are these all the big farms or all the small farms? And that makes a big difference. Mike?
One thing that you might want to clarify in this section is, are we talking about outwardly public tables or tables, in the INMP that growers need to provide information to their coalition? Because I get a little confused when I read this section. Maybe be more, I think you mean outward tables.
Yes, right? Yes, because
available
the growers
to the public, yes.
Yeah.
It says there on line 1117.
Yeah. In the Central Valley, the growers actually report the acreage for each field to their coalitions. So that information is available to the coalitions, and that information is available in audits
And
and
is
to the regional board if needed.
is the original question about public facing tables or ones that are reported to the coalition?
It's about the summary tables.
And those are the ones that are publicly available.
Okay. Yeah, I was confused. The question is confusing. What do they mean by an IMP summary table?
Yeah. And we've taken some liberty in answering the question, admittedly.
But it says just above the area, if you can scroll down again, Thomas. Written in red, available to the public. So it should be clear what we are talking about here.
Yeah. Oops, sorry.
Right.
I made a mistake here. There we go. This part here.
Yeah, and I think that was Mike's comment. Ruth, do you have a comment?
I agree with Michael's comment that it would be good to clarify that even further. Maybe could we say already available to the public or something just to make it even more obvious?
It's not available to the public in the Central Valley.
Okay.
It's only available to the coalitions, but they don't report it to the water board.
Okay, let's be specific. Ruth, do you mean, so this information, what we're asking here is this information about the acreage bins, that be available to the public.
Right.
So the public does have the information available on the individual fields and what's going on in individual fields. It also can access a table that talks about APNs rather than fields, which is usually the entire farm. And it also has tables that talks about crops in townships. The crops in townships table has acreage data, but the APN table does not have the acreage data. And the suggestion is for these public-facing summaries to add a column that at least has bins of acreage classifications of some sort.
Could we put these public-facing reporting tables? It's almost the same, but I think it's just slightly clearer. Very minor comment, obviously.
How would you like to write it?
So it would be specifically this here, right?
Yeah, these public-facing reporting tables, and then take out available to the public. Just basically take that idea of available to the public and make it these public-facing reporting tables.
Yeah.
You're taking notes, Daniel? I don't need to make that change here, right?
Yeah, I can make that change.
Thanks. And one other comment. Could we add language here just to clarify that the regional boards can determine their own categories? I think it's implied, but should we make it a little more obvious that the regional boards can come up with their own categories for that?
Yeah, I can add that.
Otherwise it sounds like those two options are really what we want. And could we provide any guidance that, the purpose of the categories is to better understand patterns in nitrate discharge while also protecting privacy or something like that. And that the guidance is there to do both of those things.
Yeah.
You're doing the wordsmithing on that, Daniel?
Yes.
For the next round. Thank you. It's really appreciated. You got a lot of work.
Mike, you have a comment?
No, I forgot to take my hand out.
Good. Okay, then let's go to line 1312. That's just a question or a comment by Ruth. Thomas, are you confident enough that these fertilizer sales are somewhat accurate enough for such a purpose? I think that's the main
Yeah, no,
question here.
I appreciate Ruth's comments on this. This is sort of a back of the envelope calculation. I would still strongly suggest that the state initiate a study that looks at this and tries to see whether from the sales data that Fertilizer Research Education Program has been collecting for a number of decades now, how much they can provide or maybe not be able to provide some kind of a validation of the state's total fertilizer use reported in these INMPs across all the regions. I think there's value for that to be done, including an analysis of why or why not those numbers can be used for comparison. The California Nitrogen Report has sort of taken a first stab at that back in 2013. And it would be worth, given that this question is about, are there other ways to validate or audit these numbers? This is an important data set that needs to be looked at for comparison.
So, Ruth, are you fine when we leave it the way it is? It is a suggestion to.
Yeah, I think just after talking to CDFA, it sounds like they already have explored that to some degree, and maybe it's not published, but they also had the same idea and explored it quite a bit. So, I mean, it's okay. I think it's okay to leave it in, but maybe we could qualify it a little bit more and suggest that further analysis is needed. The reason I put it in there is because I had actually suggested that this could be done. So to make sure I wasn't going beyond, suggesting something that wasn't possible.
I can add a sentence, yeah. Further analysis may be needed to determine whether this is an appropriate approach or valid approach.
And just to note, though, that CDFA has done some of that already. So maybe we could get some of that information as well to further inform this.
I think here it's just an example, so we don't have to tell the water board where to get the data from. But yeah, I think hopefully they will talk across different departments.
Sounds good.
Mike?
The only concern I have is that if each region's doing something a bit different and collecting data from growers, that you have the sales on the statewide basis, may be hard to get it to fit into the different regions, but that's for CDFA, I guess, to figure out.
Yeah, whoever does the study would have to figure out how to do that and account for it. I think that's definitely true.
Okay, so then there are a lot of comments in the next sections, but I would like to go to line 2038. There's now question
2038.
2038. And that's about the non-fertilized pasture systems. And Ali, you mentioned you have some comments here, and Thomas.
So this is on question 9, which is the exceptions.
Yes. And so we list pastures as one exception. Yes, here 1.3. And Ali, you would like to discuss further. Thomas, you also had some comments. So I'm just wondering is the way it is written now, is that fine, or do we still need to further discuss it? Probably Ali, if you could.
Those are, older comments, actually.
What you mean, what we should discuss. And you're still mute.
Thank you. I'm glad Thomas did some revision here. But I had a chance 2 weeks ago to speak about this with Dan Putnam. He's retired alfalfa and forage specialist at UC Davis. So he mentioned, based on his estimation, the clover-based pasture is about 5% of the total acreage of pasture in California. So which means if we add clover-based pasture, I think it's misleading. It's just 5%. Perhaps in the future, someone may challenge us, or I think we can eliminate that, go to the pasture. He mentioned, based on all the data they have, in the irrigated pasture in California, growers don't apply that much nitrogen. But we know the research showed, so growers apply less than pasture needed. So it means for growers, the productivity is not that important. They might be growers, they apply a lot of nitrogen too for pasture, but they are not that many. So basically the production is below the potential. Growers don't apply for irrigated pasture that much nitrogen. That's true part. But I think we can go with that, except we need to add something here, because if the pasture is manure-based pasture, the story is different. I think as long as we put something there to make sure we are not talking about manure-based pasture or not connected to dairy issues, I think we are okay. Just separate non-dairy pasture operation, something like
So
that.
we'll have to be careful, Ali, because you're
I
gonna
know.
throw
I know.
you're gonna throw a whole sector of agriculture here into a regulatory arena that's actually currently exempted. So currently, if I understand it correctly, from my conversations with North Coast region, there's an exception in region 5, and I looked this up. A pasture, even if it has animal traffic on it, if there's no fertilizer applied to it, it's actually exempt from the regulation. And in part, that's because it's understood that most pastures, and this is especially true in some of, in the North Coast dairies, like in Humboldt County, the carrying capacity for cattle on these pastures is really limited. And it's not that manure from a lagoon is applied to the pasture. It's really just the animals grazing on the pasture. And there is a balance there and an understanding that this is not leading to excessive nitrogen leaching. But what you're saying is, if there's any animals on there, then they should be falling under the irrigated lands, under the lands program. They should not be exempted. So that would be reversing this existing exemption.
Well, dairy, they have their own, regulation approach.
Exactly.
Exactly. So I think in that case, it's be relevant to say non-dairy pasture operation. What do you think?
But you have I'm looking at the North Coast region. You have smaller dairies in the North Coast region. And from the research that we have done in Humboldt County and in Scott and Shasta Valley, we don't see, any extensive nitrate problems, even though they have dairies, and these are pasture-based dairies. These are not concentrated animal farming operations generally, that have a need to apply manure from a lagoon across large areas. There is some of that happening to a limited degree. I don't think we need to wiggle on that exception. I don't see a need to do that.
So if you think if you have enough data, to justify that, should be fine.
And I was just wondering, on line 256 and 57, it says no external N inputs. I think that's good. So should we, when you go to line 2042, change that externally applied N fertilizer to N input, or use the same language, because here on 2042, N fertilizer could be understood as not including manure. So N input is more general.
I would be okay with that.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then let's say 2086. Oh yeah, here. So Thomas, you had a comment that we have not discussed that. My recollection is that we actually said an alternative reporting method would be the best solution for nurseries. But so that's a point we need to clarify here. That paragraph starting at line 2086.
I guess my question to you was, those that know more about nurseries, is this a case across all nurseries, or are these just specific nurseries where we can't calculate R? I understand that, from the presentations that were given, that this is not an easy thing to do in nurseries. I just don't know whether it applies generally to nurseries or whether that's a subsector within the nursery industry.
I think the point was that in nurseries, commonly what is sold are the pots that include the soil or the substrate, and that makes it difficult to calculate R, or the substrate would need to be included. So not sure if there are nurseries that don't, where the pot remains. My understanding is that probably that's in general true, that whatever is sold is still in a pot included, and the potting mix leaves the nursery. Ruth, you have a comment?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, it's very different from a situation where you're looking at the harvested crop that's removed from a field while the residue stays in the field. That makes sense to calculate what is removed and what is still there. And in this case, everything is removed. And so it might make more sense to focus on best practices, reporting R, and also maybe there are other things that could be reported on, like measuring runoff, or because really the nitrate loading would come from any runoff from water or fertilizer that didn't stay in the pot. So it's just a different system. Like, it's the way that nitrate leaves a system in that setup is very different from a farm with soil, where the soil is there all the time and the crops are in the soil and then part of the crop stays in the farm. So I think that was part of the justification for this. I think it is an interesting question. I think there's variation in nurseries between ornamental species that have, or nurseries that have many different ornamental species without nitrogen removal coefficients, versus maybe there's nurseries growing crops for agriculture that maybe those data exist, and maybe those aren't all the same. But I think it's still the case that the pot leaves the nursery, and that the risks to water quality are hard to quantify by calculating R, in terms of the parts of the crop removed when the whole crop plus the pot is leaving the nursery. Sorry, I keep repeating myself, but I feel like it's such a different system that it's important to think that through.
Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting that it needs to be removed altogether, but my question was, are we comfortable saying yes, this applies across the industry? So across the industry, we're recommending that there be this different approach.
Richard?
I was looking at beginning on 2089. It says one of the main criteria to determine reduced water quality impact from nurseries. It seems like that's kind of a little awkward wording. I mean, are we pointing out, these are things that are helpful, or are we recommending them, saying, here are practices that improve water quality, and then go through the rest of that sentence? I would suggest that if we want to recommend those practices, which I think we heard from our presenters, they recommended that as a an alternative way of regulating this particular industry is adherence to BMPs.
Yes, I can change that. So practices that improve or water quality, or probably better, reduce water quality impact are. Yes. I will change that. Thanks. Mike?
Well, I see the line, we recommend an alternate, reporting method for nurseries for R. But we don't really give a suggestion of, unless you were saying the next sentence is the suggestion, but this is specifically talking about R. So did you want to give an example of what that alternative method might be? Like, for example, just saying, through studies or something of what they're growing, they could come up with a sort of an overall R for that nursery, or just measure discharge that they might have, just monitoring what the discharge is. So if they don't have any discharge, there's no issue with R, right?
But to be honest, I don't feel expert enough to make a recommendation. So my opinion is that that's probably something that the water board with the industry should figure out what would be a good way to measure impact.
Yeah.
But others may have a clearer idea. Guru?
Yeah, Daniel, I agree with your last comment. My comment was, since no one here works in nurseries, we just had some presentations that were made to us. Maybe we add language clearly saying that, based on what was presented to the panel. And it was also in Southern California, so we don't know how nurseries are operating in other parts of the state, but we can probably add that line somewhere, maybe before the recommendation. If we go ahead with recommending alternative reporting. Although from what we heard, R is definitely difficult to calculate, but just adding that this is based on recommendations that were provided to the panel.
I can add that, yes. Ruth?
I think if we wanted to go in the direction of making some stronger recommendations, we could note as in other areas that A can be used to identify outliers and to, in a regulatory way. And also I agree with monitoring discharges. I think we could mention that. And maybe the combination of reporting A and monitoring discharges and documenting best practices could go into an alternate reporting method. But I agree, we shouldn't be too prescriptive about that.
I can add that and others agree. Richard?
Yeah, just one final comment. Forget who it was, whether it was Jerry or Bruno, but one of them mentioned, I think it was Jerry, in their county. Their county had these amazing kind of a regulatory procedure that people had to follow, and so maybe here we should say something about, the regions should, this should be left up to the region to, make final determinations or, whatever about how they want to proceed. But I think it seems like this is, a lot of those regulations that Jerry were talking about, they were county regulations, so, so other regulatory people are involved in this as well, it sounds like.
I can add that too. Okay, so but then can we leave that as a recommendation that probably alternate reporting method may be more appropriate? Okay. Then 2129. So we got a lot of comments here. That's the point you're very that's very important to you, Ali. I don't know, Thomas, can you show it with no markup because it's a little bit messy with all the.
What was the line number?
Now it's different. Let's see. Can you go back to all markup? And now just highlight a text in regions where there is no current. Yes, and now go to no markup, and then you will see.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
So how does that sound now? I have the impression we went a little bit in circles. We discussed it before. We can't go into too much detail, and Ali added some detail. It got deleted again. So we kind of have to find a way. We all agree. So Ali, what do you think? Does that work for you now?
First of all, I appreciate everyone's contribution. I know how much time you spent, a lot of good information from Imperial Valley farming community in Region 7. I think they all were very helpful. Everything I said is not because I am from the region. It's because it comes from the science, based on what I learned. I have a PhD in drainage. I believe nowhere in California we have an extensive, effective drainage system we have in Imperial Valley. We don't have that. We have about 1,500 miles of surface drainage system and several thousand tiles in this agriculture system. Every 50 feet in the fields, we have tiles. It means my hypothesis is so that the water goes down, doesn't even not significantly reach the groundwater, goes to the Salton Sea. But at the moment, I don't have the data to evidence that. But that was encouraging for me. From now, I will develop some information how that drainage system contribute and which part of the leaching water goes to the groundwater. My hypothesis is not that much, but I don't have the data at this moment. So it's come from science, not from my, the region. But anyway, I think this is good. But I also, developed another statement. I sent it to Sam yesterday. So the same message, but another language, because I think we missed a couple of things here. I would like to ask Sam if, bring that up. It's the same, but a little bit more things there.
We're going to drop that that text in the chat for everyone.
Please.
So if you could send me as an email, then I will see how to incorporate it. So if it just changes the language, that's fine. If not, go into more detail or I would be reluctant to add things we discussed previously and said, no, that should not be part of it. But if you let me incorporate it and everybody's comments, then I will have a look at it and see how we can improve it, make it clearer.
Can you show it here or no? Because I sent it to Sam yesterday.
I have it queued up for you if you would like me to put it up on the screen real quickly.
Just a few points it has, because the Region 7 mentioned about designated benefit use. We talk about salinity issue as the major issue of groundwater. So I added those because they are the fact we discussed. We know what the problem is. And I think the problem between the region and growers is exactly the groundwater monitoring issue. It's not about reporting nitrogen. I think the region might do that. But that's the big point. You heard from the growers, they cannot really spend for the resource. They don't use it millions of dollars. I think that's the point, and comes from growers. It means, they really need to look at it as not a farmer issue, as a regional and a state issue. I think if there is funding for that monitoring, perhaps growers, they will be happy.
But did you read what Thomas added?
Yeah, I like that.
The panel understands both the unparalleled burden to agriculture, for example, lack of wells, blah, blah, blah.
I use that here.
And the regional board's concern. So doesn't that cover it? So we recognize.
Exactly. I use that. It's the same. That's why I tell you the same message, a little bit different language. Yeah, I use that, Thomas. Yeah, it's the same.
Okay. So if Sam could send me in an email your version, and then I will incorporate it. Does that sound good? Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Great.
I'll share my screen again.
And then 2159 in the version with all markup. Can you switch to all markup? 2159.
Is that it? The alternate reporting requirements in footnote 33.
Just 1 second. I need to check my version. I thought. Yes. So that's added. Ruth added it. I moved it here. Is that I don't think we've ever discussed that as a group, but does it sound good to everybody? Can we leave it in here? I just wanted to highlight that because we haven't really looked at it previously. Or Ruth, do you want to add a comment to this section?
Sure. Pardon me. I added the text that's showing up in pink there after some conversations about data reported on nitrogen applied on the whole farm basis, and how it's difficult to then break that down per crop when there are 30, 50, 80 crops involved, that you lose precision in the data that is reported. And that it makes more sense to report it as it's managed, which is on a whole farm basis. So that is why that is there.
Would that also apply to R?
Certainly, R would be even more difficult. Oh, but reporting R on a whole farm basis?
Yeah.
I think the point here is that it's very difficult to report R in these systems, either on a per crop or a whole farm basis, because the amounts of each crop are so small and the information isn't there for all of them. And they are not recorded usually in a way that is easy to summarize or aggregate or add together.
So could,
The first few sentences are about R, and then only the red is added to deal with A, but R
Yeah.
is part of this point
Right.
here.
and I think in the Central Valley, the growers actually don't report R, they just report their yield. And then the coalitions convert that to removed nitrogen. And so do you think that the small diversified growers could at least report on an annual basis, how much, what their yield was on their 10 or 15, 20? I know the one organic farm I know, they grow probably 80 different crops
Yeah.
on 40 acres or 20 acres and 40 acres. And so they'd know how much they pulled off the field because they sell it. They just don't know how much nitrogen is in it.
Those are separate problems. So one problem is not knowing the nitrogen removal coefficients, but the other problem, which is different, is, and this is the reason for the alternate reporting allowance in the East San Joaquin order that was discussed at that time, is that you can have there's many crops. Let's say there's 80 crops, and then there are so many different marketing channels, and some of it is for subsistence, that it becomes very difficult to actually record and calculate it all. And the return on investment from doing that is just very low. So, yeah, so that's why, reporting A could be more effective in identifying outliers versus trying to kind of, make it work to report R, where the number might not be accurate, even if you did put a number down.
Mike?
I agree with Ruth. I think in Region 3, it's really difficult to grow these small growers, like up in Santa Clara. They have to partition all the fertilizer by every single crop they grow. And it's just a exercise in futility, It's like they're only growing on like 5 acres or something like that. If we just know the A, that would be very helpful in terms of weeding out who's impactful in terms of nitrogen loading to the groundwater and who isn't, I think. So anyway, I
also reduce the potential for error, I assume. If they don't have artificially assigning the fertilizer to crops, then there may be fewer errors.
And that's the point about precision. Like you're losing precision when you do that.
Essentially, they're guessing, because I talked with Aparna. They just make it up. So, pretty much, because nobody has records of exactly how much fertilizer they put on. They know how much they bought for the ranch for the year.
Yeah.
That can be reported. And, one grower we talked to was hardly putting any fertilizer on. And then another grower we talked to just down the street was putting a lot, So just knowing the A, I think, would be extremely helpful.
Okay, so can I just accept what Ruth added here as an additional point? Does everybody agree with this point 3? Okay, great. Then could you go to 2298? Here, just a comment. I said this is the section about best management practices, and what I suggest here is to remove the text about the irrigated lands regulatory program that should be included in R or A-R, because that should be part of question 7, and it is question 7. So I think here we should keep this section about best management practices independent on how it is going to be reported. So I'm just suggest removing the text that deals with the irrigated lands regulatory program, and it is all already discussed with question 7.
This is question. Oh, these are additional recommendations.
Yes, it's about best management practices. So I would like to separate our recommendations, how to deal with it, with cover crops or whatever in the response to question 7, and here focus on best management practices. Because if somebody is looking for our recommendation, they will go to question 7 and not necessarily down here or try to find it here. Okay, then 2417. I agree with the statement, the bullet point, that we also need to understand nitrogen uptake pattern. Does everybody agree that this is important too? We should include it here.
I find it hard to argue with this bullet point.
Good. Good, then thanks, Mike. Then 2501. Guru, you mentioned we haven't really discussed that yet. What are the points we should discuss, or that we should discuss as a group on the evaluation, the implementation? Could you guide us through this section?
I can. 1 second. Let me just look through what Hannah and I had here. I think the way we divided section 5, we had technical assistance, research, and then we had some recommendations, some regulatory recommendations. So the whole section there are recommendations to the State Water Board, more on policy and regulations. Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong. And so we wanted to walk through these as the panel. I think many of these are already captured in many the other recommendations we have.
Yeah,
Like sort of the first, yeah, go ahead.
This was all written above in response to the questions, and we kind of just extracted parts that we thought would be important for guiding evaluation or implementation of some of these things.
If you look at 2516, for instance, where we're asking for like a reduced risk category, this is a recommendation that we think, the board can put in place, more of like on the regulatory side. And we also have this language in the questions above. So some of this language here is more on the regulatory side, less on like the technical side.
And highlighting, things that have been discussed quite a bit in terms of the targets and limits should be addressed on a local regional basis. So getting away from a one-size-fits-all approach. Yeah.
So does anybody see something in this section that needs further discussion, or do you agree?
So I made those changes here in blue, but I want to put a question mark there. So there is the vulnerability zones in the EU directive. The Central Valley has, and I think other regions also have priority zones that are similar to these vulnerability areas in the EU directive. And I don't know whether we need to change the wording there. So that was one thing. I think we have some of these vulnerability zone designations already, at least in region 3 and 5. And in the buffer zones, I wasn't sure, is this buffer zones around community wells, or is this buffer zones around something else?
Around community wells.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, then I can.
The only other section, Daniel, there's a quick section there on regulatory burden. I think that's 52524. Where we said the panel noted that the regulatory burden of ILRP reporting for all of the categories of small farms. And then the last line there, we talk about the regulatory alignment study. So just making sure everyone was also fine with that recommendation we had about the ongoing, I guess, non-completed regulatory alignment study that CDFA did.
Mhm. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there might need to be some language, so I'm just looking at the next bullet there, currently the fees paid by growers, just harking back to our conversation earlier. This is just one this is a suggestion, but they can kind of.
Should we mark it as one suggestion or? Yeah, I can.
I didn't
I
understand,
can.
Hannah. What are you suggesting to this? I mean, to me, this makes sense.
Yeah, I think earlier in this meeting, a conversation came up about that. Ollie, maybe you made the comment about the way fees are structured. Should be left up to the regions, but that this is like one suggestion.
Yeah, and the coalitions.
Sorry, the coalitions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I make sure we'll use the same language as before so that it's consistent. Mm-hmm. Then if there's nothing else, I would like to go to 2712. And at the bottom of this table, oh, yep, the bottom of the previous page. It's the entire table is, so yeah, here I was just wondering its intended use of the model, and the way I understand it, Thomas, the model in region 3 would be A minus R. Is that correct?
It's an N discharge number. But it's in the formula for region 3, that's not necessarily meant to be a value that specifically estimates what's going to groundwater.
So this is really my question, and Mike and Richard, you can chime in. Is it really the main purpose of the calculation of A minus R on the central cost to incentivize growers or estimate an end discharge to groundwater? My personal impression is that we should switch the two. It is first and foremost to estimate nitrogen discharge to groundwater, and secondary to incentivize growers. But Mike and Richard, you have more experience at Ag Order 4. Mike?
Well, the situation region 3 is they already have targets and limits, right? And so that equation they have is really for complying with a target or limit. It's not meant to exactly, I guess, estimate what's going down to the groundwater, but more say you're in a higher risk or a lower risk based on what your A minus R is. And then it's lined up with targets, right? That's not the case in the Central Valley. They're trying to estimate very accurately what's going down to the groundwater and what the impacts are on the groundwater. So I don't know if I am answering the question, but it's not like the data that growers are submitting could still be used, to estimate impacts to the groundwater more accurately.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, they're providing all the correct information to do that. So it's just that it's in the context of targets and limits.
So then the primary use would be the compliance, determine compliance with targets and limits. Would that be the primary use?
Yes. What do you think, Richard?
I look at it differently. I think I think what you're saying is true, but I also think it is an attempt to get some kind of a measurement of loading. I think if you were to talk with them, the regional board, they would say that. And if you look at the components in the expanded A minus R calculation, in a way, it's not that different than what SWAT is doing. You know, the kind of the factors that are taken into consideration. They might be calculated or whatever differently, but I mean, in the end, you're trying to get a sense of the quantity of nitrogen, the load that's being, you know, that results on a ranch based on the fertilizer practices and any other practices that they do that mitigate the you know that addition. So I don't know. Do you disagree with that, Michael?
Well, I agree with you to an extent. There's exceptions. For example, for the targets, you don't have to take all the irrigation water into account, right? It's just the ET or the lowest amount. So if you're doing really trying to do accurate modeling, you might want to take all that volume into account. And then with the cover crops, we only are really saying, well, we're looking 12, you know, in over 1 year, you know, impacts of the cover crop. So that's different from the Central Valley. And that's to build in some incentives, right, for those best management practices, to incentivize them so growers hopefully utilize them. Utilize nitrate in the irrigation water, use winter cover crops. But I would say there's you know, less accuracy than what's doing in the Central Valley, but I do agree with everything else. We're pretty accurate, like the
Yeah, I guess the way I would
Yeah.
address what you just said was, you know, the amount of nitrogen that's in the irrigation water, it's there, you know, you pump it out, and let's say you didn't grow a crop, you just let it infiltrate back into the soil. You know, the quantity of nitrate does, you know, wouldn't change. And so what, you know, so I'm not, that's how I look at it. And so that, you know, this, you know, well, you came up with the idea of just crediting, or not crediting, but accounting for the amount of nitrogen that's taken up by the crop. That's to help, you know, understand, you know, how much is the crop taking up. And okay, so that's you know, that's to help the grower, you know, not get overwhelmed with the amount of nitrogen that might be in the water. I mean, far from me to argue with you about the nitrate in the water, but that's how I look at it. And so
I think we don't have to go too much into detail here. It's really just a comparison,
I know.
as Thomas highlights it. I just want the one point I wanted to ask: shall we leave it primary? Is incentivize growers, secondary, estimate, and discharge? Is that fine for this table?
I think that's accurate.
Accurate.
Well, I think it puts the emphasis on, you know, the incentives are there to, you know, they do help make the amount of nitrogen that the crop needs more understandable. how much fertilizer needs to be applied. And so I don't look at it, I don't characterize what Region 3 is doing as so much incentivizing, that's a side benefit of what they're doing. They're trying to get a sense of the loading. I don't know, if
Well,
that-
I think that for the organic fertilizers, organic amendments, there's discount factors, and that's to make it more accurate there, right? And not to disincentivize the use of organic fertilizers and compost. And I think that's quite accurate. It's just, if you took the whole equation, you were trying to say, oh, what's reaching the groundwater? Yeah, if you wanted to really do an accurate job, you would take in all the nitrate in the water. But for the purposes of complying with targets, we've argued you don't want to discourage growers from doing pump and fertilize, right?
Okay, but I think we discussed everything in question 7. I may have opened a can of worm here. Let's just keep it the way it is, unless somebody really disagrees. But I think let's just keep it this way, if you don't mind.
Okay.
It's just really the comparison between the two approaches. Okay, then we have Appendix A. I looked for pictures that from the internet, or I added pictures from the internet. If you don't like the picture, send me a better one. And then all of you, please add a short description of your your task or your short bio sketch. And then just Appendix D, that is still work in progress. I just wanted to point that out. Here there is more needed if you want to keep that section here.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all the things I thought we really need to focus on today. And now we have 15-20 minutes to discuss other things you think are important or I missed. And I think Mike and Ruth, you raised your hand, or Ruth.
Just a really quick question. When would we need to send you, like, if we wanted to add to the reference list, for example, what would be the deadline for that to get it into the report before the final version for comment?
Mm-hmm. So what I was thinking is I'm going to incorporate all the comments as well as possible, and I will send the cleaned up version by Tuesday evening to Sam, and Sam and the waterboard team, and hopefully he can send it out on Wednesday to everybody. And I think these references, we can add them later. I think that's not a big deal. But once you get the cleaned up version, please have a look at it and let Sam and the water team know whether, yes, this version can be sent for public comment, or no, there are sections we need to discuss further. If there are sections we need to discuss further, then I think the next meeting that is scheduled would be March 11. It's currently a listening session, but we can include a discussion there. As far as I've heard from Erika, that would be possible. But so I'm sure there will be things you would like to improve, or where you don't quite like the language, but we all have different writing styles. So I think at one point we just have to say, okay, it's probably not the way exactly I would write it, but it captures the main topic, and I'm feeling okay with it, because
Sure.
we can make incremental improvements for a very long time. So have a look at the next version and then say, yes, I think that's okay for me. We can release it for public comment, or no, there are really sections we need to discuss further, and then we would do that on March 11. And Hannah,
Great, thank you.
you raised your hand.
Yeah, just a question. I know that just in case there are areas where we might disagree on, not language, but or not small edits, but sort of more fundamental things. Should we wait until the public comment and feedback on the report and then do that, or? Does anyone know?
I think we
I
should
think
do it now. We got 25 minutes.
Yes, so that's one solution. We can do it now, or otherwise it really depends on you how comfortable you are waiting until afterwards. We won't have that much time, or I expect to receive quite a lot of public comments, so we will be pretty busy discussing those likely. So if there are things you really disagree, mention it now. Worst case, if we can't find a solution, we still have this Appendix E where we say this, that is reserved for dissenting opinions. If you really think, no, I don't agree with that, and the discussion we had in the panel went into a really wrong direction, that would be something to use there. I hope that will be a very short appendix. The less we include there, I think the stronger the report is, but that would be another way to deal with that. Mike?
Yes, I have two questions. One is, what's the deadline for us to review this and give an answer? And secondly, something was emailed today. Are we supposed to consider that? I mean, how does that fit in? And what do we do with that information?
Sam, could you answer these questions?
Sure. So you're referring to the additional language that Ollie provided. Is that right, Michael?
No, what was emailed to us today.
So I would anticipate anything that was emailed would be incorporated much the same as other comments that you've been providing offline. We then consolidate that and combine it into the draft that Daniel said he'd be working on, and we'll get out to you as soon, absolutely as soon as we see it. We'll get it right out to you. But that's kind of how I would anticipate including it. But Adelia, I think looks like she has a hand up and may have some additional thoughts.
But this came from outside the panel.
Understood. Adelia? It looked like you had a thought on that.
Yeah, hi Sam, sorry, it's Erica, but we were just, I guess I was under the impression that you guys were talking about Daniel is going to clean up the document that he has right now, and he has everything he needs, and he will get that to us next Tuesday, and then we send it to all the panel members. So Tuesday is going to be the 17th, and then we would send it to all the panel members. It would be a clean file, essentially, right, Daniel? You'd be giving us something that could almost be published if it was okay with everybody. And then Daniel, you're asking everybody to let us know if they think you guys need to meet and discuss again because you're not comfortable with the document, or if everybody's comfortable with the document, then we can proceed with releasing it as the draft panel report. And if that's the case, we have to notice, one way or the other, we're noticing either a workshop on March 11th, or we are noticing for a working group meeting on March 11th. And the latest we can post that notice in accordance with the 10-day public notice period is February 25th. So we would or 24th. So we would need to hear back from the panel, ideally by February 20th or 23rd, in response to Daniel's current draft, whether or not you need to meet again to discuss. And then we would just issue the public notice that would make March 11th be a working group meeting. I hope that helps clarify what we heard and just confirmation from Daniel if that's what you were, if you agree.
Yes, I agree. And I also received comments from outside groups. I think that's probably what you referred to, Mike. But the public comment period starts when we release the final version. So at the moment, there's no reason to consider comments by outside groups. And by the way, just for anybody listening, when I receive email from people I don't know with attachments I didn't request, I don't even open them. That's just cybersecurity 101. So anybody who sent me PDF files or anything, I didn't open it. So, but the public has a possibility to comment on the final version or the final draft version. And then, of course, the water board will compile everything into one document, and then we will consider all these comments.
I think that's exactly right. I was going to say the same thing. For anything you've received from third-party groups, those can be treated as public comment and would be included as part of the record during the public comment period. So you don't have to address any of that right now. Does that answer your question, Michael?
Yes, so if I understand, February 23rd, you want things back.
Yeah, so we'll get just based on what Daniel said, we're shooting to get you a clean draft by, I believe you said February 17th. Is that right, Daniel?
Yes, I think yes, Monday is a holiday, so I will send the clean draft on next Tuesday to you and the water board.
That's great.
And then you can send it out on Wednesday. Thomas?
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think the discussion today was hugely helpful. I think we touched on all of the big items that we may potentially not agree on. Targets limits, an initial target limit and how to formulate that, the transparency issue, whether or not there should be acreage data in the reporting, the diversified farms, the pasture, the exceptions for Imperial Valley. I think I am very comfortable that we as a group are at a good place that I am fully supporting of, and I anticipate that the draft that you're going to send us, I don't anticipate that I would have any major comments on it that would warrant to hold this up any longer. I'm very comfortable with where we are, and given what we discussed today and what you're going to include in that draft, that's a good point to send this out to the public and have the public review it and give us comments back. And I'm very much looking forward to hear from all the various stakeholders on this report and where we are right now. That's really sort of, I think, the next big step to take, and then take those public comments into account as we finalize this in April or May. And if there is, like I said, if there is anything that I think needs to be still discussed where I think where panel members may feel uncomfortable, we still got about 15 minutes to do that.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, today I sometimes cut off the discussion we had, but it was really important for me that we can go through the entire document, because we usually spend a lot of time on question 1 and 2, and I really wanted to go all the way through. So, but if I cut off your comments, now is the time to go back to these sections if you couldn't say everything you wanted to say. Hannah, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I didn't want to instill fear that I was going to derail the consensus we've come to and put a dissenting opinion at the end of the document. I think the one area that was just, in my head was that discussion on initial limit sort of backstop idea. I think that's kind of, and I just will wait to see what the language comes out to be for that one point. But that's the only.
So yeah, we said we would come back to that. And I think the main question really is, do we want to include target limits or focus in that section on limits alone? I think that was one of the questions we left open. We didn't go through the entire answer of question 1 and 2 So if you have additional comments to that, or whether you want to have a chance to read everything first, I don't know. Sam?
Just one other quick process note. You'll recall that after your last work group meeting, we polled you for your availability for potential work group meetings after the public comment period if needed. We do thank you all for responding. We do have 2 dates that seem to work for almost everybody. We know that it's a bit of a mosaic since some of you were available on one day and not the other, but April 20th from 3 to 6 p.m. and April 29th from 3 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time both worked for most of you. So that is an additional opportunity before your final plenary session to take a look at any comments received and see if there's any modifications that need to be made to the report accordingly. And then I'll just note, and I certainly welcome Water Board staff to mention it as well, but based on your responses, the one date that seemed to work for the final plenary session, this is when we would be asking all of you to give us sort of the official thumbs up on the report to consider it final, was May 4th, Monday, May 4th at 1 p.m. And we would, of course, have both in-person and remote options available for participation. But I just wanted to flag that there are some additional opportunities if things do need to change. And there's nothing that and Water Board staff, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's nothing that says you can't change the report after the public comment period. I imagine Erica has something to add to that, though.
No, I just wanted to confirm that agreed, the document, it's appropriate for it to, for you to revise it based off of your discussions, based off of the comments that you consider. So that's for sure accurate. And I think we just had one process question, I think, for or clarification for the next steps for the immediate future. I don't want to mix things up too much, but I'm going to jump back for a second and just make sure it's clear that, like, when we send out the clean file from Daniel, if you send us a file back with comments, we cannot share it unless there's a public meeting that's associated with sharing your comments on the final draft. So if there's one more iteration of back and forth on the clean file that we share that Daniel gives to us next Tuesday, then we just need to plan for another working group meeting, or we don't really have a mechanism for sharing that back with Daniel. Does that, I see, Hannah, you look like that didn't make perfect sense. So I feel bad that I'm not probably explaining this correctly, but if you guys give us something back with attributes and track changes in the file we're going to share next Tuesday, which is how we've handled it in the past. Every time we send a clean file, you guys give it back to us with comments, we combine it, and then you guys discuss it. This time it's different. This time you won't give us comments back. You will just let us know.
Thumbs up or thumbs down.
Thumbs up or thumbs down. And if it's a thumbs down, then you can give us your comments and we will compile them and we will get them ready for the next working group meeting.
That would be March 11, yeah.
Yeah, but if you guys give us the thumbs up, there's no comments on the file. And that's the one that we're going to release for the, we're going to ADA comply. We're going to go through the process of making it ADA compliant. We are going to give it back to Daniel after we do that for him to verify that we didn't accidentally lose any content or change anything in any way that makes it not be representative of what it should be identical, except for it will be ADA compliant, and Daniel will verify that. And once we get the thumbs up from him is when we would release it to the public. So just sort of wanting to clarify that part of the next steps, just in case it wasn't clear. And sorry, that was long-winded. And then yes, I can comment on it after.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, Adelia. So I was going to, by request from the panel earlier, work on incorporating possibly some graphics into chapter 6. I don't think it's particularly essential, but if this is going to sort of delay the process, or is this something I can send you in the next 24 hours and you forward it to Daniel so he can incorporate it into his draft.
I think that you could send it to us. I mean, Daniel, you have the option of picking one person to work with until next Tuesday. So that could be an option for you two to pair, and then you could provide those graphics to him through that pairing.
Yeah, that can work. Yes.
And then, but Thomas, were you saying you need our help creating those graphics?
No, I'm just asking for the process. If it sounds like it might be too complicated, I'm totally fine not doing it. If the rest of the panel is fine to skip that and maybe add it at a later, after we receive public comments on the rest of the report. I think this is a real minor point that we wanted to add for clarification, not really essential to the gist of the report and the main messaging of the report. And we can work this in April, sort of the post review version. And I don't really anticipate this to be an item that would cause a significant consternation in the public. So we can also wait with this. But if it's easy enough for me to pair up with Daniel for the next 5 days and submit that graph to Daniel so he can work it into his draft next week, then we may just as well do that.
Yeah, I think either way works. And also the bibliography in Appendix C or so, I think if we complete that after the document has been sent to the public, I think nobody will complain if he completes the version. I can even add a comment, will be completed for the final report. Either way works. Okay, did we miss something today? Or a section you highlighted for yourself where you thought, oh no, we really need to discuss that and I skipped today?
Daniel, I have a quick question for Delia. Regarding the bios that Daniel requested, can we send that to you to send to Daniel before the 17th, before next week, Tuesday?
Yeah, I think that would be great. Send it to water boards and include Sam. That's always really helpful. You could reply to any of the emails you've gotten from Sam, reply all, and then we'll make sure that Daniel gets your updated bio and any updated pictures or anything like that. So happy to do that.
Yeah.
All right. So are you ready for some public comment, Daniel?
Yes, if there are no further comments. Well, thanks everybody for the great discussion and that you helped us move forward and get through the entire document. I really appreciate it. And of course, not just today. We had great discussions throughout the whole process, and we'll continue having discussions. But thanks a lot for all the contributions today, especially. And so then, yeah, Sam, please feel free to take over.
No, that's okay. And congratulations to you, Daniel, as well, for kind of shepherding everybody through that process. It was really impressive to watch you move through the document today. All right. So we're now at the point of the meeting where we're going to conduct public comment. I think most of the individuals joining us today are very familiar with our process at this point. But I will just note that per the meeting notice, we did request that anybody who would like to provide public comment contact the water board staff in advance of each working group meeting. We did receive requests for 6 comments today. I will note that all public comments will be limited to no more than 3 minutes apiece. We do provide the opportunity for people to pool their comment time if they would like to, though. So the way that it'll work, I will read off your name and then unmute you, and we can go ahead and work our way through the process. I do really ask that people stick to that 3-minute timeline. I'll give you a warning as time expires, and then we'll move on to the next commenter after a few more seconds. So the first individual that we have up on our list this evening is Tess Dunham and David Corey. And I'll note that Tess and David are pooling their time today. Tess.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. And thanks to all of you. I know this is, you're probably facing some fatigue. So I appreciate that. I think we all are. I will keep this quick. And with me today is David Corey. He is the phone number on your list, Sam, because in case you hadn't noticed that. So, but he is here with me as well today. I want to keep this short. I just want to provide a little bit of information on the connection between the CV salts nitrate control program and the ILRP requirements in the Central Valley, in particular as it relates to kind of your targets limits discussion that you've been having for the last couple of meetings. And just to provide some explanation, because I know you have all spent considerable amount of time understanding how the East San Joaquin order works, and maybe have not spent as much time understanding the overlay of that program with the nitrate control program. So I do have just a few slides to help visualize that overlay. So next slide. Some of you may have seen this before, but the nitrate control program in the Central Valley is basically being implemented on a prioritized basis. The priority 1 areas are those in red. The priority 2 are those in orange, and the remaining areas are in green. Obviously, there's no surprise that the orange and red are in the areas of the valley where we have the most preponderant nitrate water quality issues. And you can also see that when it comes to the orange and red areas, almost all of the southern San Joaquin Valley is covered except for a small portion of Kern County. The green that you see on the west side is Westlands, where there's not a lot of drinking water being used. And then, of course, we have just one small area in the northern part of the state because of obviously differences in precipitation, recharge, and farming. So the green areas are non-prioritized, meaning that the regional board maintains the discretion to decide if and when they will apply the nitrate control program. But most importantly, we are implementing the program in the orange and the red areas, which I think is the primary area of concern when it comes to nitrate and groundwater. Next slide, please. So within the nitrate control program, the comparative is we need to put forward milestones that will be incorporated into the irrigated lands programs. And in fact, the first one is going to be happening this year. Those milestones I see as being comparative to the targets and limits discussion that you are having. And there are 2 types of milestones that are being put forward within the nitrate control program. The first milestone has to do with an A/R ratio range on a crop basis. The coalitions had to submit a proposed A/R ratio range per crop. And gosh, I think that was last year we submitted it. It is going through review by the regional board now. We have a milestone that basically says a certain percentage of growers need to be within this range in X number of years. And in that, we set our ranges as we have recommended to the regional board. The top end of the range is actually the 75th percentile of growers for that crop. And the lower end of the range is based on research and literature, a lot of work that you've all done, based upon what might be doable but may not be doable every year. But that is the range that we have put forward, is kind of this 75th percentile at the top end, and then literature, values at the lower end. We also have another milestone that's set at for meeting the groundwater protection targets, which we developed through use of CV Spot and NP-SAT. And again, it has to be a percentage of townships that meet these targets. So there are other key interim milestones, but I think for your purposes in the target and limits discussion, those are the most important. Next slide, please. What is the impact of those milestones, right? Understanding your incentive is to want to make sure that those that are the most excessive are being put into a program, right? There's some type of a backstop to get to whether you want to call them an outlier or those with excessive application. And there's been a conversation about, well, is limits the right thing or is targets enough? Well, what I can tell you in the nitrate control program, we have the biggest incentive there is with respect to having growers meet these milestones, including a grower specific milestone of the A over R ranges. If we don't meet those milestones, then the regional board has the ability to remove the exception for meeting nitrate exceptions for nitrate water quality objectives. Currently, we are seeking a 35-year exception to meeting objectives, and there are a significant number of milestones within those programs. Any failure to meet these milestones, which are basically enforceable within the resolution that the regional board would adopt, could result in the removal of the exception. I think that is the backstop. There is no need for limits in the Central Valley when you consider that we have this backstop. Talking about the iterative process, those exceptions and milestones and whether we've met them has to happen every 5 years. And in that process, every 10 years, we have to give a comprehensive report on what is the available best management practices and technology and control that might be available to growers. And that 35 years is not a given across the 35-year period. There's always the potential that it could be truncated to a lower time frame. Next slide.
That's your time is almost expired.
Okay, I think this is close enough to the last slide. You know, the relevance, you've talked about the limits to the 80th percentile. We would lose the exception. We have set an A over R at the 70th percentile, and it pretty much covers the Central Valley where we have areas of concern. And then I know this is the last slide. And just our recommendation to you to remove the use of the 80th, which you've already talked about today, understand the nitrate control program and how it is used. I think you've already done that with your deference to the regional board and their process. So I will end it there.
Thanks so much, Tess. All right, next on our list, we have Modibo Keita. Modibo.
Good afternoon, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. This is Modibo Keita with Sustainable Conservation. Thank you to the panelists for working to recognize the importance of management practices in meeting the state's water quality objectives. It's exciting to see the report taking shape. Regarding your recommendations on the integration of practices into ILRP, we have 3 areas of commentary. First, on our other and adaptive management. This topic has consistently come up throughout the expert panel process, which speaks to its importance. Adapting with the times is critical for the process to be as meaningful as we all want it to be and to avoid finding ourselves back here again in just a few years. Therefore, we urge the panel to provide guidelines for how and when regional boards can update permits to reflect new practices and science under our other. Second, on crediting cover crop mixes of cereals and legumes, line 1388 on page 34 of the report reads, and I quote, "Meta-studies have shown that cover crop mixes, cereal and legume mixes, can help reduce nitrate leaching. However, in California, this strategy has not yet been demonstrated and is mentioned here because as this practice is evaluated, it may be shown to be a viable strategy to reduce the risk of nitrate leaching. In this case, regional water quality control boards may be justified awarding cover crop mixes a credit." End quote. From what we've heard, we feel there is adequate California-based evidence for the efficacy of cereal legume cover crop mixes in mitigating nitrate leaching. 2 of Dr. Eric Brennan's research publications comparing cereal cover crops with legume cereal cover crop mixes, Brennan et al. And Brennan and Boyd, are listed on page 11 of the panel's list of documents. Given the existing California-based evidence of legume cereal cover crop mixes mitigating nitrate leaching, we're curious about the panel's uncertainty. We would like to request that you elaborate on that statement to explain your position or adapt the statement to reflect the state of science. Recommending for cereal legume cover crop mixes to be recognized the same as non-legume mixes could do a great deal to broaden the applicability of cover cropping, since most acreage outside of Region 3 employs legume mixes. Third, regarding soil nitrate testing, we appreciate how the panel recognized the importance of soil nitrate testing and given how critical this testing is to informing effective nutrient management. We would like for the panel to provide further insight into what effective soil nitrate testing would look like. While we understand that in an ideal world, soil nitrate levels would be tested all the time, we recognize that this would be unrealistic to implement and sustain across all acreage. We would appreciate hearing from the panel what you think a minimum threshold for meaningful testing would look like, as a reference for the water boards to consider. Thank you for your time.
Very much. Okay, next on our list, we have Kaya Rivers. Kaya.
Hello, good evening. My name is Kaya Rivers. I'm a senior policy advocate at Community Water Center, and I wanted to thank you all again for dedicating so much of your time to this process. I know it's been lengthy. In regards to your responses to, or in regards to your response to question 1, I and impacted communities agree with the panel that there is a point at which nitrogen discharges to groundwater are excessive, as communities have the results in their domestic wells to prove that claim and assertion to be true, with 4 to 5 times the MCL for nitrate in their drinking water, requiring households to depend on point of use and point of entry systems or bottled water indefinitely to provide them and their families with safe drinking water, or requiring communities to receive water from nearly 2 miles away because the water directly under their community and the surrounding area is so extremely polluted, leading to very expensive water bills. The regional board's data also prove that there is a point where nitrogen discharges become excessive as well. The Central Coast Regional Board's data shows that in 2024, nearly 30% of acres are still not meeting the voluntary discharge target of 500 pounds per acre meant to be achieved in 2023. And specifically, over 6% of acres are discharging above 1,000 pounds per acre. Even though the panel has identified that discharges are excessive at this current moment, the response to question 1 has been reduced from recommending that the State Water Board set limits on the highest dischargers to recommending either targets or limits. The program has already attempted to use targets in order to reduce nitrogen discharges, yet discharges still remain high. I urge the panel to revise this recommendation to recommend that the largest contributors are addressed as such. Specifically, I encourage the panel to recommend to the State Water Board that the Irrigated Lands Program uses the best practicable treatment and control by setting limits on the highest nitrogen dischargers, as well as using interim limits as a backstop in addition to interim targets for dischargers below the 80th percentile. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to provide comment today.
Thank you, Kaya. Next, we have Maddie Richards.
Hi there. Good evening, everybody. My name is Maddie Richards, and I'm the policy manager for California Coastkeeper Alliance. Thank you again to all the panelists for all of the time and thought you put into drafting and revising these recommendations over this process. And thank you also to State Water Board staff for all of the work you've done to facilitate this panel. Looking at the most recent version of the report, under question 6, the draft response says that limits on fertilizer nitrogen applied have questionable benefits. Among the reasons provided is that having more than one metric in place may be confusing to growers, which is a regulatory consideration. In responding to this question, it would be super helpful for the panel to offer your expertise on whether there is a scientifically supported basis for using these application limits as a metric, not necessarily the only one, for developing interim limits to protect groundwater. To that point, there's also international research supporting that limiting fertilizer nitrogen applied has had benefits. In both Germany and Denmark, limits were set on certain agricultural practices which had nearly immediate reductions in nitrate concentrations in shallow aquifers. Germany's approach has included, in addition to an A-R limit, requirements restricting nutrient application. Denmark also found that after implementing nitrogen application restrictions, average groundwater nitrate concentration was reduced. In the response to question 1, the panel concludes that there is a point at which nitrogen discharges to groundwater are excessive. The same can also be said about nitrogen application, that there is a point at which plants cannot absorb all of the nitrogen applied. The report also cites a need to develop recommended nitrogen application rates for other crops. To address this need, I think it could be helpful if the report could recommend resources which could be used to address this gap. Finally, I wanted to touch on the changes that have been made to the panel's recommendations for initial targets or limits. I apologize if I say something that the panel already resolved in this point, as I had to step out for a moment during this part of the discussion. But an earlier version of the report suggested setting initial targets or limits at the 80th percentile of A-R data, and this recommendation has been weakened to the 80th to 90th percentile in this version. You had strong reasons for suggesting a percentile-based initial limit at that lower end, and I think it's essential that that reasoning and stronger recommendation stays in the final version of the report. Thank you again, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the public draft.
Thank you, Maddie. All right, our last public commenter for the day is Sarah Lopez. Sarah.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Would it be okay if I share my screen?
Let me see, just a moment. All right, you should be able to now.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so okay, hopefully we're looking at draft 8 of the panel report, and lines kind of 514 through 536. Is that what's showing up for other folks?
It says that it's still loading, unfortunately. I'm not sure what's on Zoom tonight.
Whoops. How about now?
No, I'm sorry. It's still not loading.
Okay. I'll give it one more shot and then just proceed with my comment.
There you go.
Okay, great. So this is draft 8 of the report, and I know that the panel members discussed this a bit this evening, so some things have changed. But my comment here is actually more of a request for clarification from the panel members. And I'd heard the panel members having some discussion about initial backstops around the 80th percentile. And then this, there's a statement in here about some regions, e.g. region 5 and 3, have already set initial targets and the panel supports these approaches. And so my intention here is to ask a clarifying question. So I'm switching my screen over to the limit schedule from Ag Order 4.0. Can you see that now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so my question for the panel members is, in deferring to the regions, the preferences of the regional boards in what targets and limits to set, and I'm listening to this kind of with an ear towards, okay, how am I going to maybe comment on the final draft on behalf of 2/3 of the acreage of the Central Coast, which is in, a multi-crop rotation of vegetables. And so deferring to the Central Coast Water Board, the Central Coast Water Board has already given us their preferred schedule for targets and limits, and it's here in this table, C.1-3. And it prescribes limits that will apply to multi-crop vegetable farms of 200, A-R equals 150, A-R equals 100, A-R equals 50. And so the limit for 200, which is, I can't remember if 200 is our median or below our median, our 80th percentile is around 375. So the limit of 200 that the Central Coast Water Board prefers applies 5 years from today. The limit for 150 applies 10 years from today. And so my clarifying question for the expert panel is it your intention? I see Mary's got her hand raised, so she's going to correct me. That would be great. But my question for the expert panel is it your intention to communicate support for this schedule of targets and limits as it applies to the Central Coast vegetable industry? Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have time for just probably one more comment. I see a hand up from Mary Hamilton. Mary.
Thank you all. And Sarah, thanks for your comments and my question. I did want to clarify and make sure, or I just wanted to make sure that the panel members are aware that while the board did adopt, the Central Coast Water Board did adopt both targets and limits with the schedule Sarah shared, the State Water Board has, in their order to us in 2023, remanded that portion of the order back to us. We no longer have any limits in our order. Those are all converted to targets, which are, as you know, non-enforceable goals. And so unless the state board were to take an action that reinstated those or allowed us to make findings to suggest new limits, those limits that Sarah showed are actually targets, they are not limits. And as of this date, they do take effect as targets in this resolution. So I just wanted to make sure everyone had that.
Thanks for that clarification, Mary. All right. That takes us to the end of public comment for the evening. Very quickly, I just want to recap the primary kind of assignment or action item for the day. Daniel is going to be working hard over the next couple of days to get a clean draft of the document. Staff and myself will send that document out to the expert panel no later than Wednesday morning, February 18th. And we would ask that panel members take a look at that. And again, we're not asking for comments on this draft, but rather for your response on whether you think that the document is ready for public comment or if you need another meeting scheduled. In the event that you need another meeting scheduled, there will be a work group session held on Wednesday, March 11th. So please do take a look at it as soon as you see it. We'll get it out as absolutely quickly as we can. And I think that was kind of the big assignment for the day. So let me go ahead and hand it over to Chair Geisler first, and then Deputy Director Karen Mogus for closing comments. Daniel.
Just want to say thanks everybody for the contributions today and have a nice evening.
Thanks, Daniel, and thanks for everything you've done. Karen?
I will keep it just as brief. Thanks for the great discussion and the comments and everybody's participation, and a special thanks to all of the panel members. You guys are doing a lot of work and really, really, really appreciate it. So thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you all.